Welcome to the Real News Network. I'm Greg Wilpert in Baltimore. Earlier this week, Brazil's right-wing president Jair Bolsonaro said that he wants to pass legislation that would allow the police to shoot and kill criminals so that they, quote, die in the streets like cockroaches. Here's a clip of the interview where he said this, and that was published on YouTube last week.
Someone breaks into your house with a gun, and if you stop to think whether to shoot them or not, you're dead. You have to shoot him. That guy, the criminal, needs to understand if you invaded a private property, he's going to suffer the consequences. We are sending this bill to the Senate for approval. From the moment I am protected by the protection in case of legitimate defense, defending my life and the life of others, my property and other people's property and patrimony, violence will drop drastically. These guys, the criminals, will die in the streets like cockroaches.
Bolsonaro's call for more police violence is part of a new legislation he is pushing called excludente de licitude. It would give police officers legal cover to use lethal force against civilians. Human rights groups reacted with outrage to Bolsonaro's call. They point out that police violence in Brazil is already very high. For example, in Sao Paulo, the police killed 414 people during the first half of 2019 alone, the highest number since 2003. Joining me now to discuss this latest effort of the Bolsonaro government to implement his far-right agenda in Brazil is Mike Fox. Mike is a freelance reporter and regular contributor to the Real News Network and many other media outlets. Thanks for joining us again, Mike.
Thanks, Greg.
So how does Bolsonaro's so-called tough-on-crime policy fit in the larger framework of Bolsonaro as president? And what effect is this policy having on the most vulnerable sectors of Brazilian society?
Well, like you've said, it's already had a massive increase in the number of police killings around the country. Sao Paulo, more than 400 people within the first 6 months. Rio de Janeiro was roughly double that, which was the highest figure in roughly 2 decades. And in recent years, it's already been very, very high. But we've seen even cases as early as February of, according to witnesses, police executions. As many as 9 people during a drug trafficking raid were just lined up and shot, executed. This type of thing takes what we've seen in Brazil already, very, very high violence, very, very high police violence going back years, and it takes it to a whole other level. So that's on the police front, and it's very difficult, it's very intense, and extremely disturbing for human rights observers and whatnot. At the same time, his violent rhetoric is also incentivizing violence in kind of far-right communities. We've seen an uptick in the threats against LGBT communities, social movements. You saw the killing just a couple weeks ago of an indigenous chief in northeastern Brazil by a group of gold miners, and that also kind of raised flags internationally. So this thing is happening, and it's growing. The impact of this kind of violent rhetoric, and it's spilling over. It's also led to the self-imposed exile of many leftists here in Brazil. You saw that with Jean Willis, who was the top gay congressman in Brazil up until the end of last year, and he left after a series of death threats on his life. And of course, he's from Rio de Janeiro, the same place as Marielle Franco, who was killed last March. And so all of this is kind of, it's this pooling together and having a massive impact. And obviously people are concerned.
Yes, I actually want to dig a little bit deeper on that. Bolsonaro and the right in Brazil have long tried to link crime to the left or to social movements in Brazil. For example, Lula was actually imprisoned on charges of corruption when the truly corrupt are basically still allowed to go free for the most part in Brazil. Now, tell us about how Bolsonaro is pursuing this link between crime and social movements, and are people and the media buying it?
Well, first of all, it's important to understand when you ask if they're buying it, on what side are they laying? We know right now that Bolsonaro, roughly a third of the country supports Bolsonaro. Roughly a third of the country is extremely against Bolsonaro, and the other third is somewhere in the middle. And those people who are backed by Bolsonaro and completely for him, of course, they're going to buy this, and they're going to share it on social media. Again, we know that Bolsonaro, since his inauguration on January 1st, he has lied or shared false or manipulated information at least once a day. So very similar to Donald Trump in this way. The same fake news, the same pushing of the identity, the narrative that the PT is connected, for instance, to the criminal organization, the PCC. That just came out this last week of them trying to make those ties. It is not, but them online trying to make those ties. And of course, it's pushed by Bolsonaro's people. The same thing is happening right now. For roughly 2 months, we've had social movement leaders from the housing movement in Sao Paulo that had been in jail under accusations of extortion and under accusations of connections to like a criminal organization, of them being a criminal organization. So these connections, these ties, that is exactly what Bolsonaro and this sector is trying to do. And it follows this narrative. Bolsonaro ran on this narrative that the PT was a criminal organization, and basically they were the ones that destroyed the country. This goes back to what the far-right guru Olavo de Carvalho has been talking about for years, saying that there's this cabal on the left that's been trying to destroy the government and take control, and that communism, that's what it is. And that's where Bolsonaro comes in, and that's really where he's ran on this. And so his supporters are very much in favor of this. Of course, everybody else, those people that back Lula very much, and those people that back the left, the social movements, what they've seen is kind of a crackdown on their own interests. We've seen a series, an uptick of surveillance, of police either invading or going into social movement spaces and monitoring what they're doing, monitoring meetings. The most recent here was on August 2nd, when a group of military police went in during a meeting of women of the PSOL, the leftist party, the PSOL in Sao Paulo, and basically they monitored people, they took people's names and said, we're here to watch and follow what you're doing. So this is extremely concerning, taking into consideration the history that the dictatorship has and Bolsonaro's own relationship with the dictatorship. He was obviously, he was a captain in the military under the dictatorship.
Now, while Bolsonaro has been using this crime argument in order to go after social movements, as you're saying, crime, ironically, has actually been declining recently. As a matter of fact, it started to decline even before Bolsonaro got into office. Now, I'm wondering, though, what effect is this crackdown, that is particularly the extra-judicial executions and the surveillance and in poor neighborhoods, what effect is it having on people there? I mean, surely they must be reacting very negatively, particularly in those poor neighborhoods, or do people also there maybe see some positive aspect to this?
Look, in general, in the poor neighborhoods, obviously there is a massive kind of outrage to this. They've seen an uptick in the amount of human rights abuses in those neighborhoods. We've seen this for years in Brazil, but definitely within just the last 6 months, 7 months, we've seen this uptick. We had, like I mentioned, you had the case of the executions against people in that neighborhood, and people are distraught by this. This is a major. They've been trying to link Bolsonaro. They've been making comparisons between kind of Bolsonaro's attack on criminals or attack on poor communities, and making that connection to Duterte, right, in the Philippines. So this is a big issue. But you do have people. I remember late last year, I was in Rio de Janeiro. I was interviewed this one gentleman named Clayton, black from a poor neighborhood, and he was adamantly in favor of Bolsonaro because of the crime issue. So you do have some people that are going to be backing Bolsonaro because of this. They want to see a massive crackdown. But overall, in the poor favelas, in the poor neighborhoods, they're the ones that are being most impacted by this. And they're the ones that are feeling these human rights violations absolutely directly. And obviously, to put this into context, we also need to understand that Bolsonaro is not cracking down. He might be trying to track down on narco traffickers, on crime in general, but there is no crackdown on the militias. And this is a major piece because we have to remember that the Bolsonaro government, Bolsonaro family, has major ties to the militias. If you look at Bolsonaro's son, Flavio, until late last year, the man who is responsible from the Special Operations Police Unit, who is accused of killing Maria Franco, or at least being involved in the killing of Maria Franco last year, both his wife and his mother were employed in Flavio Bolsonaro's office as of late last year. So these connections are really, really tight. And it's even fascinating because these corruption charges against Flavio Bolsonaro were kind of rolling through the beginning of this year, through the very beginning of Bolsonaro's term. And the Supreme Court put a stop to that. They said that investigation cannot go on. So we have not seen any sort of crackdown on the militias, while at the same time what we have seen is an indiscriminate crackdown in poor communities.
Now, finally, I want to return to the issue of the anti-crime legislation that Bolsonaro is pushing, his package. Now, what likelihood do you see that this law or this package will actually pass in Congress, and how is Brazil's Congress and the media reacting to this proposal?
So there's two different things. I think it's important to put that in context. On the one side, you have this one item that Bolsonaro has been talking about, which would basically be a get out of jail free card for police and military who act indiscriminately when on the job. And also not just police and military, but also average everyday folks. And I think that's one of the major concerns about what Bolsonaro is calling for, is that it can be used kind of across the board in attacks against whatever cases. It's kind of a get out, like I said, it's a get out of jail free card. So that's one piece. The other piece is this anti-crime package that Sergio Moro, Justice Minister Sergio Moro, has been trying to push since February. Now, right now, the Senate and the Congress have been really focused on pension reform. Obviously, that just passed Congress like last week, and it's now moving on to the Senate. That's what the focus is. So this anti-crime package has kind of been in the wings. It's been waiting. People have been talking about this. At the same time, we also need to recognize that Justice Minister Sergio Moro has taken a hit from his major involvement in these the Intercept leaks that have come out over the last 2 weeks, showing that while he was a judge overseeing the Lava Jato task force, the corruption task force, he was extremely biased in his case. He guided prosecutors, and his conviction of Lula, former President Luis Ignacio Lula, was in itself biased. So he's really taken a hit. Before this, he was seen as kind of the golden boy who could do no wrong in Brazil. And so that's going to weaken the chances of that anti-crime package to be pushed through with such force. We've also seen, according to reports just over the last couple of days, that members of the Senate and Congress have been kind of lukewarm on Bolsonaro's freeing up of this indiscriminate package of kind of giving a carte blanche to military and police to be able to do what they need to do. So we're probably going to see kind of a weakening of that within the anti-crime package. At the same time, we also understand that Bolsonaro is backed by the BBB, right? The Bible Bullets and Beef Caucus, which is one of the major caucuses in Congress. And that is a major piece that people are going to be pushing this in order to kind of really back Bolsonaro in this sense. So I think it's going to be a bit of a fight. Obviously, Bolsonaro's comments that criminals should be shot in the streets like cockroaches are shocking. Many of his comments are shocking. And these comments go back to last year when he was talking about how he wanted to push this through and really open up the police's ability to really crack down as much as they want to. The major concern, obviously, again, for social movements and members of the left is how this will be used. If it is allowed, we're going to see what happens in the coming months.
Okay. Well, we're going to leave it there for now. I was speaking to Mike Fox, freelance reporter based in Florianópolis, Brazil. Thanks again, Mike, for having joined us today.
Thanks, Greg.
And thank you for joining the Real News Network.